Lately, I've been hearing something a lot, and in some ways, it brings me a great feeling of catharsis to hear such a unanimous agreement among progressives when they say it. On the other hand, it brings me a great amount of frustration that the left is so far behind the realization I had like 8 years ago at this point, and that many others have had, going back a decade plus, that it's very frustrating and worrying that we are this far behind in catching up with what the right has going on. You see, lately we've been hearing the term that the left needs its own Joe Rogan a lot. For those that aren't aware, Joe Rogan is literally the most listened to person on the entire planet. No single man has anywhere near as many people sit down to listen to him speak on a regular basis as Joe Rogan does. He is by far the biggest podcast on the planet. His podcast is fucking huge. His viewership across all platforms is massive. He is one of the most influential people alive right now on the planet. And as a devout Trump supporter and hardcore conservative these days, not so much in the past, but nowadays, more recently, it's hard to deny that, okay? He was fully endorsing of Trump. And obviously promotes the conspiracy theories and the misinformation, the pseudoscience, the like fake medicine and all that shit. But he is still the most listened to voice on the planet. And every time I bring up this fact, I notice the same thing always getting brought up in chat. Such as what Victor Seafog said. No hate to you whatsoever. I'm just using what you said as an example. I don't see the appeal of Joe Rogan. He is a dope. The fact is, if you don't like Joe Rogan, like you really hate him, and you see no appeal, then chances are you've deliberately gone out of your way to avoid as much exposure to Joe Rogan as possible. And the fact is, most people do not do that. The average person, in fact, is very likely to encounter Joe Rogan content. And Joe Rogan content is undeniably some of the most interesting content on the internet at some times. At the end of the day, no matter who you are, something about his content is going to interest you. For instance, a channel that you will very, very frequently see come up in your recommended, even if you are not a Joe Rogan fan, is the Joe Rogan Experience Clips channel. This is the dedicated clips channel of the Joe Rogan Experience. And if we sort by popular, you can see some of the most viewed videos of just clips from his podcast, right? Interviewed Jamie Foxx. That got 32 million views, but that was 7 years ago. Coronavirus stuff, Shocked by Conspiracy, Ben Shapiro. This video, though, this came up in my recommended a few days ago. And I listened to it. It was very interesting. Graham Hancock is a little kooky, Obviously, anytime I watch a Joe Rogan segment, I'm doing it very critically, and fact-checking any claims that I hear for the first time to hold them up to scrutiny. But very interesting segments. He also had a guest on named Paul Rosalie. This guy, I've binge-watched a couple of his appearances because he's actually really fucking cool. But Joe Rogan, if we scroll through his most popular videos, look at this shit. Look at, how many views these videos have. He is bringing on insanely famous guests, hell, even just niche people that he has found that have a crazy life and crazy experiences to tell stories in his podcast. And Joe Rogan is not a smart guy, but he knows how to, at least when it matters, to shut up and listen and at most to ask questions and let the guy with the way more interesting things to say speak on his platform. And his platform is where you can go to reliably see some surprisingly interesting people speak. No one is watching the Joe Rogan Experience necessarily for Joe Rogan. It's for the fact that he is an everyman. He is just as mind blown by stories about uncontacted tribes in the Amazon rainforest as anybody else would be. And all he has is questions on questions on questions, asking everything that could possibly come to your mind as well. And so even I, as someone who does not like Joe Rogan and despises Joe Rogan's politics, I find myself having a hard time not clicking on some of his videos. Because they're sometimes just... they're interesting, you know? And so with that in mind, I think it's important to realize that Joe Rogan does not exist as the Joe Rogan of the right because some right-wing billionaires decide to fund a guy and prop him up, make him a political propagandist, and make him into the most listened to voice in the world. That is not how Joe Rogan got to be Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan started out as just the dude who did a podcast, one of the first to ever do the concept of a podcast, and did it for a long time when it wasn't even popular, continued doing it, used his fame and recognizability from his podcast and his past, career to get some big guests on. And every time you bring on a big guest or some interesting person who's got a crazy, crazy fucking life, you end up having the opportunity to bring in a whole new audience. And slowly but surely, every new podcast where Joe Rogan brings in a biologist or a guy who does like bow hunting in Alaska or something, he gets a dozen clips to upload that all hit some different niche in the algorithm and he appeals to the broadest conceivable audience that you could think of. And so, with all this in mind, the left can't just manifest a Joe Rogan. The idea that the left needs a Joe Rogan calling for this comes off as desperate. The right was never calling for someone like Joe Rogan to exist before he came into existence. It just organically occurred. Joe Rogan gamed the algorithms phenomenally. He gained the prominence that he had, and a level of credibility as well, and a quite large and loyal audience. And just like at any time, as he got bigger, bringing on guests who talked about kooky, crazy bullshit, as he always has, started to have a real impact. So much so that the news media started to cover it. And all of a sudden, this guy who just wanted to talk about random shit on his show is getting attacked by the media because of misinformation his guests are spreading. And from his perspective, it's like, what the fuck, what business what does the media have to be attacking me because some rando I brought on my podcast is saying something they think is crazy, you know? And obviously we know why that's not a reasonable response to the criticism, but to him, it makes no sense. And to his audience, it makes no fucking sense. The left comes off as buzzkills, and like we have a massive stick up our asses when we make fun of or attack or criticize Joe Rogan. And so here we are now, with Joe Rogan being solidly and firmly conservative, being the most listened to voice on the planet, and now the left is calling for, after attacking Joe Rogan constantly, calling for the left to have its own Joe Rogan. It's like, had the left recognized, had the Democrats, had any of these groups recognized years ago when it was already obvious that the left needed its own Joe Rogan, maybe we could have done something about that already. But now, I don't know. It's gonna be a hard fight, you know? It's gonna be a hard fight. It's hard to say, like, oh, the left needs its own Joe Rogan, or it's easy to say the left needs its own Joe Rogan. It's hard when you realize that Joe Rogan is literally the most listened to voice on the planet. It's up to you, Zan. No time like the present. I would like to think I could be that voice, but I highly doubt that it would be me. But to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about here, and like just how like interesting this stuff is, you know, I recently got super hooked on the Amazon rainforest. It's like a hyperfixation of mine lately. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. It's very deadly and uncharted, and there's just a lot of things about it that are super interesting to me. And so Joe Rogan has brought on some of the most accomplished explorers and biologists that have been in the Amazon and studied it and have crazy-ass stories from being in this deadly environment. that there are. And so if you want to listen to these people and hear what they have to say and see them go into detail about their lives and their experiences, Joe Rogan is the best place to go to hear about that. And that's just one interest that I have. Like, Joe Rogan as a whole team that went out and they found this guy to bring onto their show. This is one of my favorite Amazon rainforest content creators. He's actually pretty based as well. This is an example of Joe Rogan bringing on someone who's actually a very good influence onto his show. This guy runs a charity, right? I don't know if it's a charity. It's more of like a organization that focuses on hiring people to act as rangers to protect the Amazon rainforest. They raise money to buy parts of the rainforest. They have the legal right to protect it with violence if necessary, particularly trying to prevent very, very large old trees from getting cut down illegally by loggers. And they'll offer these loggers jobs as like rangers protecting these tracts of woods. He's doing great work. And so he's gone on Joe Rogan. But like, this is not a Joe Rogan segment. This is a segment from the Paul Risley guy. And this is him in the Amazon rainforest, just for an example of like the kinds of people Joe Rogan brings on as guests regularly, and why people find his show so interesting, even if you aren't really in it for Joe Rogan or his politics or anything.
People always ask me if I can speak to animals, and over the years I've had the chance to interact with everything you can imagine, and I've been bitten by a large number of them. The thing that has brought me the most inside the animal mind and into their world has been the times when animals have been wounded or needed help. I've had the chance to rehabilitate everything from squirrels to birds, toucans, wounded snakes, giant anteaters. I've even had the chance to spend time with rehabilitated herds of semi-wild elephants in the jungle, which is an incredibly unique experience and allows you into the mind of the animal in their environment. And so the question of whether or not we can...
This guy's got a wildly interesting life, and I would love to have him on my stream, frankly. I just want to talk to this guy, because he's interesting as fuck. And the fact is that Joe Rogan is just a platform for some of the most interesting people on the whole planet to convene and talk in long form, in detail, and elaborate on questions that everybody has. And then on top of that, the clips from his podcast go insanely viral because in whatever niche they're related to, constantly sending out little grabbers to bring in crowds of new fans to Joe Rogan's show that are from completely disparate communities and interests, all to one central place where it just so happens the guy who hosts that platform and the general culture of the platform is quite conservative. And so I found myself both feeling a sense of catharsis of like, finally, you realize it, but also a sense of frustration at how long it took for the left to finally embrace the fact that the landscape of messaging and politics now exists almost entirely on the internet, and for there to realistically be any chance of countering what the right currently has in terms of cultural domination of the internet. It's going to take something so much more than anyone imagines when they think the Joe Rogan of the left, right? People keep saying Hassan could be the Joe Rogan of the left. Not you guys, but like people in that space, right? On the left will say it. I cannot stress how much less popular Hassan is than Joe Rogan. It's like Hassan is in the kiddie pool, Joe Rogan is in the Olympic-sized swimming pool, okay? It is worlds of difference, okay? Hassan is also hated by everyone outside the left. Normies and conservatives and everyone in between hates Hassan. Only like the left-wing sphere tolerates or likes or loves Hassan. So he doesn't really have any like influential power outside of the left. He's just kind of consuming what exists of the left online to himself. But Someone's got to be the new Joe Rogan, or the Joe Rogan of the left. It's going to be me. Now, in all seriousness, in the coming years, we're probably, hopefully, going to see a big shift. And hopefully this will involve the left and the Democrats recognizing that getting big streamers, content creators, YouTubers, podcasters on board with their campaign and endorsing them, much like the Republicans did, is the future of politics. It is. And on top of all of that, it can't just be, oh yeah, by the way, this one streamer happens to be progressive. There's got to be a level of culture around it, a community, a market for progressive ideas. Because right now, the truth doesn't sell. There's no market for the truth right now. And if there's no market for something, no one's going to say it, no one's going to produce it, and that's what's happening right now. There's no market for progressive content, so people aren't making progressive content. And in a way, you kind of have to make that market when it comes to progressive ideas right now. That's how far in the hole the left is in terms of influence, and it's a worrying thing. But I've been wanting to have this rant for a few days now, because it feels like this is a very important milestone in politics where a broad agreement has been reached that the left needs to embrace the internet. And I know that sounds crazy for me to consider like a big deal, maybe to some of you, but legitimately go back 4 years ago and the idea that the internet and social media mattered in the slightest in the grand scheme of things when it came to elections or national politics would get you laughed at. You would be called childish, you know? Like it was seen as naive to think that. But now, I think we can all agree that the internet is basically where all of politics starts, and the White House is where it ends. Anyway, bit of a shorter segment. Maybe you'd consider it a bit aimless, but I feel like I did pretty good with that one, making my point and getting what I wanted to say out there. If you enjoyed that segment, if you found it entertaining, educational, or in any way enjoyable, please consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, if you want to support me directly, or supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buying some Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below in the description, if you can afford it and you feel like it. Or, if you want to see my social medias, you can follow them through the link down below in the description. I've got my Twitter, my Blue Sky, my fan Discord. It's all linked down below. And finally, if you want to support me for totally free, and in a very quick manner, I really do appreciate it if you hit the like button and comment down below, as every single thumbs up and comment in real time boosts my channel in the algorithm, and it really does help a lot. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell icon if you haven't already, so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload a new video. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching, as always, and I hope to see you again in the next one.